Hello, ladies and jelly spoons, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and on today's show I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And do you know what happens when the Michelle Bass and Emma Greenwood of the Terrace get together? That's right, we're going to participate in the 5th series of a well-known reality TV show. We will both be evicted after the second week, but we moved into a secret bedsit next door where we can observe the housemates' every word and play the occasional prank on them. We'll be allowed back into the house for a fancy dress party, and then after a food fight gone wrong, we will instigate one of the biggest brawls on reality television. We will culminate in a tray being thrown at a fellow contestant's head. And while we're waiting for the security team to break up the feud, we'll have a nice long chat about lower league Scottish football.
It's funny, I remember Michelle Bass.
Yes.
I don't remember too much about Emma. Was she Welsh by any chance?
Oh, she might have been. She was kicked out after fight night. Michelle Bass was allowed to stay, but Emma was kicked out. I think she was the one that launched the tray against Victor. The back of his head. Yes. Now, you might, on this, Shaughan, I have used for comparisons, I've used the Victor and Jason of the Terrace before. I used the Michelle Bass and Stuart from the Terrace. So now it's the Michelle Bass and Emma Greenwood. I really think Big Brother Season 5, we might have squeezed all we can from it, but we'll see.
A great series, though. A really good series.
Brilliant. Certainly, I think after Season 4, I remember that's when Cameron from Orkney won, and everyone was very nice there. So I think that the producers really decided to really fuck shit up. And yeah, the Jungle Cats, Ahmed, Stu, Michelle, Nadia, of course. Can you imagine Nadia was these days? People would absolutely be furious about that. It's pathetic just how regressive things have got.
I worked in Orkney for about 5 or 6 months, and it was after Cameron had won Big Brother, and he was very much regarded as a hero up there. Even though he literally just won a television show for not doing very much at all.
Do you remember his brother used to present Scott Sport?
Oh, that's right. That's right. That was a real weird time for Scott Sport, wasn't it?
Aye, Sarah O.
Yeah. Did we ever figure out what her surname was?
I think it was Sarah O'Flaherty.
Right, okay. But just say that. Just say Sarah O'Flaherty.
Sarah O sounds very sort of like you're in Steps, you know, that sort of stuff. It adds a sort of degree of glamour that the role doesn't necessarily deserve.
You can imagine somebody with that name presenting The Word rather than Scott Sport.
Exactly. And maybe it should have stayed that way because, like you say, Shaughan, a very weird period for Scottish football broadcasting. To be fair, they were well ahead of their time because the stuff they're doing where they would introduce the match highlights, fans would be standing in terraces in the background. This is sort of stuff that Sky Sports is doing now. They were well ahead of stuff like Finalysis and all that. So
that's right. It was very cringy though. I can't say I was too keen on it at the time. But you're right. It's they very much set the trend.
Well, listen, when Miguel Delaney's on Sky Sports News playing the piano, we'll know that culture has really come back full circle. But Shaughan and I are here once again to cast our eyes on every single thing that has happened in lower league Scottish football over the past 7 days. We will share our reflections of how our teams performed in the Scottish Cup 4th round, analysed how some other lower league teams performed, and we'll also have a chat about Peterhead's match with Hamilton Academical in League One and how Stirling Albion fared in League 2, the only 2 SPFL games that took place over the weekend. Before we start, Shaughan, are you well?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very busy. Probably the highlight over the past 7 days was getting a chance to host the KDM Evolution Trophy draw for the quarterfinals and semi-finals. That was good fun.
I thought you were very professional. I tuned in at 1 o'clock on the YouTube channel. I thought you were really good.
No, thank you very much. I tell you who wasn't good. Lovely guy. I want to say it's lovely guy. But when Stephen Craigan drew Inverness Caledonian Thistle versus Stenhousemuir, I was going to strike him with an open palm. I was so annoyed about that. And the funny thing was that I was getting loads of text. I could feel my phone vibrating in my pocket. And when I pulled my phone out, I just got useless cunt over and over again from my mates for getting probably the most, not like it's a difficult draw because Stenhousemuir have beaten Inverness Caledonian Thistle twice over the course of the season, but perhaps the most inconvenient draw, like a midweek trip up to Inverness. It's not the sort of thing that anyone really wants.
It's all quite unappealing. I tell you what I would say about Stephen Craigan. He was very thorough in terms of when he was like stirring the bulls. so thorough actually that even when he was doing the semi-final draw, he pulled out the 3 balls. There was only 1 ball left in the bowl, and he was still giving it like a massive stir. And I'm like, this feels slightly less necessary now that there's only 1 left.
I've got to say, he's a lovely, lovely guy. He's an absolutely smashing guy. It was great to talk to him, and he really knows about stuff about his lower league football. He does his stuff with BBC Alba, but he keeps his hand in. So I was able to chat away to him about stuff, and he was talking about the B teams. I've really spoken in the past. I'm not a big fan of the B teams being the competition. He used to coach Motherwell's B team, but he was saying that it's the young players absolutely love getting a chance to play in the Challenge Cup because it's a great chance to just test yourself against men's football. He said that a lot of the time, these teams in the middle of the park are probably the better sides, but it's just in both boxes where they let themselves down. Just perhaps a bit inexperienced up front, not strong enough up front, and maybe a bit sloppy and careless at the back when you're dealing with the big boys.
I remember, did his Motherwell side that he coached, did they get to the semis one year?
Certainly. Oh yeah, I think they did. Did they play like Ross County or Connah's Quay Nomads or someone like that en route?
They either got to the quarters, but I've got him, it was at least the quarters, but I've got him ahead that they got to the semis. And I remember Stephen Craigan doing a kind of preview of the match, and he was very, very enthusiastic about the opportunity it was given his players, and he said it was a broadly positive thing, which as much as I disagreed with, but I did also think that he was talking like that because ultimately he was involved in it and his team was involved in it, so he wasn't going to really say anything different. But if that is his opinion in general, that is a positive, then I suppose he knows his stuff.
Well, if he was an Athletic fan watching 13 people play against Hibs B, he might have a different thing to say about it. But no, really good guy, good company. But that was the highlight. That was highlight as well. I also tried assisted stretching and contrast therapy as well. I tried that on Sunday. Then went to watch 28 years later the Bone Temple. But I don't want to turn this into a sort of. So that's where Craig Fowler talks about stuff that he's doing. I honestly can't hit the fast forward button quickly enough. I just realised as soon as I said those things, I've become the thing I hate. I love the guy to bits. But his drinking stories just I don't find them appealing.
And in fairness, before we move on, I'm going to have to ask you what that thing is that you've described before you went to the cinema.
Well, for men of our age, and I'm not just saying you and I'm going to imagine the listeners are all sort of like beer-bellied 35-year-olds that have got to sort of work in an office, have maybe got a kiddie under their belt, don't look after themselves as much
Slight
as
odour.
They should do. Slight odour, yeah. Arguing with their girlfriend a lot, have game late into the night, have maybe taken out an OnlyFans subscription just to see what it was like with someone they fancied. They only did it for a couple of months and cancelled direct debit. Has a poor relationship with their parents. Low achiever. You know the kind of people that I'm talking about here. Yeah, you can picture them. They went to the View for the Terrace live shows. No, I'm joking, of course. But no, assisted stretching. Effectively, it is. It's basically just stretching, but you're working with someone who can maybe put you into positions that you necessarily couldn't do yourself. So it's quite good in terms of getting the blood flowing and getting the muscles working. They take a wee massage gun over you, which is really good when they put it into the thighs. And just very, very good. And then the contrast therapy is just as it sounds. You spend a lot of time in the heat and then you spend a lot of time in the cold, or a wee bit of time in the cold, and then it just feels very invigorating.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So how are you supposed to do it like every week or every couple of weeks or every month or never again?
No, that's one of the big selling points is at the end they were like, it'd be great if the effects of this wear off very quickly, so you really need to start coming back if you want to use it. It's like the plot of the movie Catwoman, starring Halle Berry. It's like they bring this like anti-aging cream, and if you stop using it, your skin turns really old and wrinkly, so you need to keep using it.
A really bad film. As bad as it gets.
Yeah, it's like, like the movie Catwoman. If I'd say what's it about? It says it's about a woman who pretends to be a cat. Effectively, there's a really funny bit when she's in a restaurant and there's a huge fish tank and she's got her face up against it and she's like darting, looking at the fish. There's a bit where she's just eating all these tins of tuna on her bed, and there's a really funny scene when she starts playing basketball with the guy. What's the song? Mystique? Scandalous? What's the one? Beergard may spin. It might be scandalous by mystique. I can't remember. Nonetheless, give 20 years later the Bone Temple a go and give Catwoman a go. Both amazing movies. But that's enough.
Very strange as well, because like in the comics, Catwoman doesn't think she's a cat. It's not as if she's like kind of a hybrid cat / human. She's a cat burglar.
Yes,
like she isn't like eating fish all the time and what have you, and cream.
I really think there was a bit lost in translation between the person reading the comic. I think the person who wrote the script hadn't read the comic books. So let me get this straight. It's a cat woman. So this woman is a cat, right? No bother. Let's knock something up about that. Right, enough, Shaughan. We've been here too long. We need to move on and talk about the football. We will start very briefly talking about how our sides got on in the Scottish Cup. I know there was a show earlier in the week covering the fourth round, but if we talk about it, we can at least recognise some of the players that were being discussed rather than just names on the internet. And Shaughan, we'll come to Sunday afternoon. Raith Rovers defeat 1-0 at Aberdeen. Look, didn't look a particularly good game of football. Jack Milne's goal early on being the only real moment of intrigue. On last week's podcast, you were swithering whether or not to head to Pittodrie. Did you end up going?
I didn't. And to be fair, the main reason I didn't go was because I was up in Aberdeen on Tuesday night as well. I was going to the Biffy Clyro gig, and I was like,
how was it?
It was good. It was good. I mean, I enjoyed the Biffy Clyro songs that I knew. I mean, I'm not a huge Biffy Clyro fan. It was more, my pal was really keen to go and couldn't get a ticket for Glasgow. So he was like, well, do you want to go to Aberdeen? I was like, well, not really, but you're desperate to go, so I'll go. So a good night, and like they are like a good live band, but it's not a band that I've particularly into. But no, it was fine. But I really did think that was probably too much kind of grey misery to go to Aberdeen twice in 3 days. So I didn't go. But in terms of the Raith game, it was probably, certainly in terms of how it started, it ended up being not as bad as I feared it was going to be, but also not as good as I hoped. Like, to go a goal down after 8 minutes, I thought it was a really poor goal to lose. And I think probably took Raith maybe 15 minutes or so, because I thought they started really poorly. Really poorly. Barely touched the ball before Aberdeen scored. But then it was like it occurred to them that actually Aberdeen weren't very good. I think eventually the penny dropped for them that actually there was an opportunity for them to get at Aberdeen, and Aberdeen weren't necessarily going to like have them penned in for the majority of the game, because Aberdeen aren't particularly good. Their confidence is low. They had a kind of makeshift back four. Their strikers aren't really scoring. The problem is that Raith strikers aren't scoring either. And ultimately, the only time it looked like Raith would grab a goal was that kind of weird 2-minute spell in the first half where it looked like Aberdeen players were just really keen to kick the ball into their own net. Like, they nearly scored, like they were just essentially playing themselves into trouble. I mean, I don't think Raith almost scored, Aberdeen almost scored 2 own goals, and there was no real Raith player like trying to put them under any pressure or anything. It was just a really weird kind of passage of play. But I thought second half, Aberdeen come out the second half were a good bit better, and I thought maybe it left it a wee bit too late to bring fresh legs on and get the substitutes on in the second half from Dougie Emery. So I was relieved in a way, because I thought after the first 10 minutes it was going to be a bit of a doon. But I do think ultimately the Rovers were probably disappointed at the fact that it felt like an opportunity that they just didn't take and didn't really perform well enough on the day.
I see you've signed Andy Winter on loan from Livingston. Is he the player that's going to address perhaps the lack of firepower in the team at the moment?
Not if he keeps continued to get played out wide, which I don't really understand. I wondered if he would have started up front and maybe Hamilton dropped out on Saturday, but I think Hamilton's height probably meant that he retained his starting place. Whether or not he warranted that, I'm not entirely sure. Even if Winter was to start up front, and I think if he is going to start, he should play up front, because he's not somebody he's not overly quick. He's quite physical. I think he works hard. He can't beat a man. I've never seen him. Don't remember him putting in too many crosses. I just think he is ill-suited to playing in that wide role. And even if he was to play up front, I think he would give Raith more of a presence. And I know he scored goals for Arbroath to a degree in League One last season, but that's not necessarily a barometer that he would replicate that at Championship level. So no, I have doubts that Winter will be a game changer when it comes to that bit of recruitment.
Now, Raith Rovers were formerly managed by Ian Murray. Ian Murray's first game at his new club, Greenock Morton, was in the Scottish Cup against Stenhousemuir, and Stenhousemuir won that match 4-0. I was there for that. Shaughan, is there anything, I'm desperate, is there anything you would like to ask me about this game?
Did you, going into it, did you think that Stenny had a reasonable chance of victory? Because I remember when the draw was made, you weren't that fussed about the draw. You didn't think it was the most eye-catching of pairings.
It wasn't the most eye-catching of pairings, but I think this might have been the most eye-catching result of the fourth round. I think going into it, given that Stenhousemuir at that point were top of League One, they've since been knocked off it by Inverness, Caledonian Thistle. We'll come and chat about them just shortly. But given that Stenhousemuir were doing very well, that Morton had gone a couple of weeks without a game of football, and prior to that they'd been in quite bad form, and I think there's a bit of upheaval behind the scenes at the club as well. I think a lot of people, even sort of most casual observers, might have fancied Stenny for this one. And it's funny because when you see a scoreline like 4-0, you think, my God, they must have got an absolute battering. But I broadly agree. I've watched all the post-match interviews from Gary Naismith, like Darren Jameson, Matt Aitken, Greg Buchanan, from Ian Murray himself, and they're all broadly in agreement with one another that 4-0 perhaps flatters Stenhousemuir, but you really have to praise the way the Warriors went about their business. I think there was perhaps an element of luck. Eamon Brophy had a pretty wretched game, if we want to be honest. He missed a really good chance, probably the only real incisive bits of play from Morton in the first half, where Brophy managed to squeeze between two defenders. It was more or less one-on-one with Darren Jameson and put his shot past the post. And then at a goal down, Dickie Jameson giving away the worst penalty I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not kidding, man. It's like the most stonewall penalty you'll ever see in your entire life. But Brophy fluffs his chance. He's a really poor penalty, and it's saved by Darren Jameson, and then Stenhousemuir go up the park and make it 2-0. And at that point, at half time, they're thinking, geez, there's almost a sense of disbelief that Stenhousemuir have had two chances and have scored from them both. Ross Meakin with I don't think he knew much about it. It seemed to hit off the back of his head. And then Matt Aitken with quite a nice finish, like a sort of flicked header that went in just before that. And at the interval, you're thinking, well, at this stage, Morton are really going to come out in all guns blazed. They're 2-0 down, and they've really got nothing to lose. And they didn't. There was never any point where I thought, geez, we're under an absolute doing here. There was a chance they had where I think it was Brophy had a shot and Darren Jameson saved it and tipped it, got a hand to it, but just wasn't able to stop the ball. And Archie Graham comes and just toe pokes it away just as Michael O'Halloran's there. That was the only really good chance that they had after that. And they had loads of the ball, just didn't do anything with it. And if you're, and Stenhousemuir on top of that, just their tactical discipline, their energy, their off the ball work. These are guys that are quite happy to let you have the ball, try and break them down. Very difficult to do. Greg Buchanan scored from a third set piece, just mortifying. And then right at the end, just the Morton defence all over the place. It was effectively a long ball up the park that eventually worked his way to Matt Aitken, and he finished. So Morton, I don't think they were dreadful, if I'm being honest with you. Maybe they were. If you suppose you lose 4-0 to a team in the league below you,
they look disorganised.
Disorganised, yeah.
Definitely disorganised. And like the fact that you've already said there, first three goals all came from set pieces.
Yeah.
And I would say this about Ian Murray's Raith Rovers teams. They conceded loads of goals from set pieces. Maybe not as many as 3 in a game, but I wouldn't necessarily, if it's something that Morton already struggle with, I wouldn't necessarily think that Ian Murray is the man to rectify that deficiency.
But it's something that Naismith acknowledged in his post-match interview, that he packed the team with big laddies. I mean, since we are generally the first 11 is like a lot of big guys here. Matt Aitken's about 6'2", 6'3". Buchanan's about 6'3". Jameson's about 6'4". Then you've got guys like Ross Meakin, who's about 6 foot. Kinley Billam's really good in there. And so he knew that if they got set pieces, they could really hurt Morton. And I suppose the only one where they were super take advantage of that was the third one, where it was a Kinley Billam set piece, was hit towards the back post, headed across from Nicky Jameson, and Greg Buchanan finishes. The one from Ross Meakin's goal, just really disorganised. You know, the fact that it's able to bounce about and it hits off the back of his head. The fourth goal, quite disorganised. And I think that if you were looking for a new manager bounce from Morton, then you certainly didn't get one. And already Murray is, I think he's got a bit of work to do to try and win the fans back. I do appreciate that Dougie Emery is a tough act to follow. And when you see the results, how they played out after he left, you get the impression that because of some weird alchemy that he had, him and Morton just seemed to fit together really well. Some weird chemistry that he had. He was able to extract an extra like 5 or 10% out of these players. And I think that Murray will have a lot of work to do. One, to try and turn the season around, because it is in danger of faltering and get dragged into that relegation battle alongside Queen's Park and Airdrie and Ross County and so on. And then just to try and convince him that he's the right man. I think he is. Like, Murray's got on the whole a pretty good track record, but it's just not a particularly good start.
It was interesting as well in terms of like post-match. Ian Murray was talking about, we need help. We need help, which I took as it sounded like he was talking about the fact that they need kind of reinforcements in over the next week or two, and that seems like a sensible thing to say and an obvious thing to say. But there is also this thing that you've already mentioned. It's not a great look. So let's say bodies don't come in, or they maybe just they're able to bring in one. I don't know what the constraints might be in terms of the budget there. But it isn't a great look when you say, no, we need players in, we need this, that, and next thing. Because of what you've just mentioned. Like, it isn't a great look for Ian Murray if Dougie Emery can have this, what is a limited squad. I'm not saying he had them playing particularly well, but you never really thought that Morton would be in bother this season. But that was such a terrible, terrible result, performance. And if he can't get a similar types of results and performances as Dougie Emery, then like, supporters will pick up on that, and it will be it could be a difficult time for him. I suppose I'm trying to say, if he can't get anything like the type of performances and results that Emery was able to achieve.
Yeah, early days, and on top of that as well, it's you are coming up against, I know there's a different level, but Stenhousemuir are just like a really good team at the moment, and Oakview has proven to be a really difficult place to come. I think they've not conceded in the last 6 games at Oakview in the league. I might have read that, I might have misread that, but they've lost once there, and that was right back at the start of the season against Al Athletic. So staring a crest of the wave at the moment, and it was brilliant after the match in the wee bar. You've been in there before. You know they do the wee bar man of the match, where like Andy McFate or John Divers will come round in the last. They'll go around the fans, man of the match. They've got the team lines there, and they'll try to keep it a secret when they're not it down. So it was very difficult to pick because there were so many good performances there. Darren Jameson had a real huge effect in the game, saving that penalty. That was a man of the match moment. You know, just the way things worked out. You're 1-0 up. It could have been 1-1. Then it goes 2-0 because of your intervention. But Matty Aitken had a great game. His second half performance was outstanding. As we mentioned there, Stenhousemuir did really have a lot of the ball. So the times they did get it long. Aitken was up against, like, I think Ian Wilson came on at the start of the second half, and Ian Wilson's a big laddie, but Aitken was shoving him around, and it was great to see. In fact, the foul that led to the third goal, that was Aitken getting the ball, a long ball, when his team, there's nobody anywhere near him, getting a long ball, turning Wilson, and then just trying to sprint forward with it, and Wilson basically just sort of like grabbed him by the hips and threw him to the ground, and then the free kick goes in. But Aitken was class. But Aitken, I voted him wee bar man of the match. He comes into the wee bar and everyone's like in a brilliant mood, high-fiving him. It's amazing. Then, there's Nicky Jameson coming in. And, there's Ross Taylor. And then pretty much the entire team are in the wee bar there. So it was great. It was brilliant to give the opportunity to celebrate a huge result with the players. Really, I saw Ross Vicky, man, just so proud of him. Like, he's done a really good season. Gave him a big hug. And just like delighted. Mikey Anderson in there as well. Gregor Buchanan, his Mada and his sister were in there as well. So it's great. It's great, and it's the result. I think you might have seen on social media afterwards. A lot of people say, "What a job Gary Naismith's doing. Why is he not getting touted for bigger jobs?" And I think that's the kind of result. It's one thing like beating East 5-0 or maybe getting an upset against Inverness Caledonian Thistle, but it's a national competition. Everyone's eyes are on the Scottish Cup. And when you see the result like that, I think that's when people are thinking, he's probably got a chance of going elsewhere.
I thought it was interesting as well that in terms of Naismith, when he mentioned afterwards it was a wee kind of felt like a pointed reference when he said that certain managers don't give them enough
we know
credit.
what he's talking about. We know what he's talking about there.
I presume that was aimed at grinning Pete.
Yes, I think so. We said at the time when we covered that match that post-match interview, all the players, all the managers would have been listening to that and just laughed at it. So, he was right. He was right because what's the expression? Hard work beats talent, and not saying that this Stenhousemuir team aren't untalented, because they really are, but they will just hunt and kill for one another. My goodness, Ollie White coming in there on loan, 19 years old, and you've seen it yourself. Young players coming in on loan, maybe going through the motions a wee bit, but Ollie White is completely committed to the cause there. So really good for him. And the team have got a home tie against Falkirk in the fifth round on the television as well. So I am. When I was watching the draw on the YouTube, I actually properly yes, when we got it. I think at that stage, you would want Rangers Celtic away because you'll make a lot of money from that. Hearts or Hibs away, can't have that. They're not in the competition anymore. Or you want Elgin at home. Elgin or the Spartans at home, maybe the smallest team that gives you a better chance of progressing. You can't get that. Get Falkirk away. I think it's probably, I'm maybe saying this because it's my team involved. When you look at the draw, it's probably the most interesting tie of the round. Maybe another one we'll come on and touch on, but the fact is I just knew that was going to be the television. Not too keen that it's on Sunday at 7:30. That's a bit of a downer. A Friday night would have been better, but I do understand Falkirk are playing on the Wednesday, so it just doesn't work the way it is. But I'm really, really excited for it. I think it'll be a very, very difficult game, and obviously Falkirk would be the big favourites for it. Let's see how we get on.
Class, fair play. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I know every now and again there will be a supporter's reaction that catches her eye. Did you see the Morton fan? She was drinking she had a cup of coffee in one hand, and it was when Gregor Buchanan went to celebrate in front of the Morton fans at 3-0.
He just stood in front of them. Tell me, what was this woman doing?
So, obviously, you can't see Gregor Buchanan's face, so I don't know what his facial expression is. But he was clearly getting under this lady's skin, and to start with, she kind of flicks him the finger. She just flicks one finger at him, but then it's like she thinks better of it, and she's almost embarrassed by her own behaviour. Remember the weather? Who was the weatherman? Was it that somebody Tabernacle that was flicking the finger and then realised he was on screen? And then
no idea.
And then he started rubbing his nose or something. So she kind of done that. So she flicked the finger, then she started rubbing her nose as if to say, "Oh, actually, that's embarrassing. I shouldn't have done that." And then I don't know what happened, because by this point there's now maybe 7 or 8 Stenny players now in front of the Morton fans. Yeah. And she just loses her on herself. She goes mental. She's just screaming at him. And she totally changes her approach. She goes from one finger to flicking the V's. Very, very funny. Very good.
I'll need to go back and see that. Yeah, I remember Buchanan playing for Morton. I didn't realise that there was any animosity between him and the supporters, but I suppose if you've been getting pelters all match, then what a great way to score. Just stand in front of him. That really annoys him. When you don't even celebrate, you just stand in front of him. A couple of other eye-catching results, Shaughan, from the fourth round involving lower league sides. Perhaps the biggest upset, maybe Dunfermline Athletic beating Hibernian 1-0.
Yeah, I thought it was a poor game. I thought Dunfermline done really well. Certainly from a kind of defensive point of view, I thought they kept Hibs at arm's length. I'd kind of watched it, but wasn't giving it a full attention. Watched it in the pub before I went to Kilmarnock Dundee. I was at that game on Saturday, so I watched Dunfermline Hibs beforehand. Thought they'd done really well certainly from a defensive point of view, and then I'd managed to get that brilliant goal, but scrappy, but brilliant to get it in the last minute. I thought the celebrations were class. It just feels
brilliant,
it feels like Dunfermline have, although they're sitting 5th in the championship just now, and as much as it's been a kind of hot and cold season, and we'll see what happens from now and the remainder of the campaign, but it does feel like Dunfermline's got something about them at this moment in time, and I do feel that this result could give them a wee bit of momentum for the rest of the season, and then who knows, they might be able to finish in the top 4, but a brilliant result for them.
Yeah, the other big upset, the Spartans beating Inverness Caledonian Thistle on penalty kicks. The match finished 0-0, and the interview on Sports Scene with Paddy Martin was class. Paddy Martin seems like a really affable big guy as well, and he was saying that the goalkeeper coach on the Tuesday night went to watch Partick Thistle versus Inverness Caledonian Thistle. That match finished 3-3, went to penalty kicks, and he was actually able to pass on some interviews, some information to Paddy Morton, and that allowed him to go the right way when there was penalties. Perhaps more interesting, there was a post-match interview with Dougie Samuel on Sports Scene. It was 6 seconds long. 6 seconds long, but he exists. We've heard him speak. He didn't speak for much, but he was on Sports Scene, so fair play to him.
I got 2 messages on Saturday night to say, you'll never believe it, Dougie Samuel's just been interviewed. You're saying it was only 6 seconds long. That is the longest he's ever done. Even if in real life it only lasted 6 seconds, the longest we've ever seen. Fair play.
That's good. Let's see, Dougie, if you're listening, and I hope you are, go and just give us 20 seconds on the Spartans Twitter page just after the result. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you think. And on top of that as well, you'd have probably got really long odds if you suggested the Spartans would be the club from Edinburgh that would go furthest into the competition as well. Fair play to them.
Yeah.
Sticking with penalties, Shaughan, before we move on to the SPFL matches. Bit of bother at Stranraer. On Tuesday night, they played Queen's Park. They drew that match 1-1 and then subsequently went on to win 6-5 on penalties, which would have got them an absolutely plum draw against Rangers at Ibrox, which would have been a huge boost for the coffers for Stranraer, something that everyone associated with the club would be absolutely excited with. Our mate Chris Aitken, I've no doubt, was completely over the moon, but it looks like they're going to be booted out of the competition for fielding an ineligible player, Lyndon Taz, a goalkeeper who they signed on loan from Heart of Midlothian. He had basically, the game was supposed to be played on Saturday. It couldn't have been played because of a frozen pitch at Stair Park. In the intervening period, Hamilton Academical recalled Josh Lane, their goalkeeper, and so Stranraer have to go out and sign another goalkeeper, Lyndon Taz. He's obviously got a good relationship with Hearts. Guys like Dom Plank's been doing very well. He goes in, has a good performance, saves a penalty, and then disaster strikes. He's not able to play.
Yeah, I feel really bad.
Shouldn't have been playing even.
Yeah, I feel really bad because although I haven't seen any of the highlights actually from midweek, but I did watch Chris Aitken's interview. He's talking about how proud he was of the players, how great it was for the club, and how important the finances are going to be to them. They've had a really difficult couple of years. It's going to make a massive difference, and then to know, obviously, a few hours later, things were very much going to change from when that interview was done. In terms of the scenario, it looks like if it had been an emergency loan, then it looks like that would have been fair enough. So Stranraer have said they're going to appeal, and it looks like the appeal is going to be based on they're saying it very much was an emergency loan. I think an emergency loan has to be 7 days, but the fact that the SFA have already pulled them up for it, the SFA must know that they didn't declare it or register it as an emergency loan beforehand, and it feels like they're almost trying to suggest it's an emergency loan retrospectively, which I can't imagine it has a huge chance of success. And we've seen situations before where a club gets cited for fielding an ineligible player, and it might be a scenario where they get brought in as a sub and they play 15 minutes or whatever, and folks say, oh, well, that seems really harsh. In this scenario, not only did he play the entire game and he saved a penalty as well, so he had an amazing match. He had a huge impact on the outcome of the match. So I do. But listen, who knows? Maybe they'll be able to, maybe it'll get replayed. Maybe they will get kept in, but I would be astonished if that was the case.
And just an interesting wrinkle, a couple of years ago, Queen's Park themselves were kicked out at this stage of the competition for fielding an ineligible player. I think it was Ewan Henderson that they had on loan from Hearts.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
It's always Hearts.
It's always bloody Hearts. Bloody Hearts. That's a shame. Hopefully they can get it resolved. It's an absolute nightmare, but it's by the sounds of things, as of recording, it's going to appeal. It just doesn't sound good for Stranraer, and that's a damn shame in it. But it does set up an interesting tie if Stranraer are kicked out of the competition. Queen's Park will take their place. It sets them up against Rangers, who famously they knocked out last year.
Yes, I'd be very surprised if lightning strikes twice, but fingers crossed it does. If that is the fixture that comes to pass.
Brilliant. Now, let's turn our attention to the 2 SPFL matches from the weekend. We'll start by looking at Peterhead 2, Hamilton Academical 3. Kevin O'Hara's early goal was immediately cancelled out by Kieran Shanks. Stephen Bradley put Accies back in front just before the hour mark, and although Niall McGuigan appeared to have the game tied with a strike late on, Stephen Hendry scored the flukiest goal of the entire season in the 93rd minute to win the game for the Accies. This is an absolute scandal that this went in. It felt like a missed opportunity for Peterhead to close the gap on the teams above them. They're in 5th place with 26 points. The Accies, meanwhile, they have leapfrogged Cove Rangers into 8th place. They have 19 points. Shaughan, tell me what you thought of Peterhead 2, Hamilton Academical 3.
Massive win for Hamilton. I mean, this kind of got them out of the bottom 2 places. The fact that kind of starting 11 or that squad is just getting stripped of certainly experience and quality almost daily. I mean, that's Jamie Smith has now left the club. He's away to Livingston. I had a look at the bench from the weekend. I didn't recognise too many names on there at all. You'd imagine it'll be players like that are maybe having to come into that starting lineup potentially from February onwards. So they're really important 3 points. I suppose the fact that they were able to dig it out from getting clawed back twice says a lot about them at this moment in time as well. So fair play to them. I did think that Peterhead were a wee bit unlucky. Like even before Hamilton took the lead, albeit they were 1 up within the first 10 minutes. Jamie Smith had a double save. Before that, I think when Peterhead went to make it 2-2, it very much felt like the momentum was with them. I think it was Danny Strachan missed a really good chance to put them 3-2 up. And if you thought at that point, if anybody was going to win, it was going to be the Blue Toon. But as you say, it was just a crazy goal that sealed it in the last minute. What I would say is, though, as much as they were maybe a wee bit fortunate to get all 3 points, I thought the celebrations and the aftermath of that goal between the players and the fans was absolutely brilliant.
Aye, absolutely. The goal for anyone that hasn't seen it, because this actually looked like a fun game. Some of the passages of play, going by Peterhead's highlights, both teams, it could have been a draw. A draw might have been the fair result here, but this is what happens when physics stops existing. But the winning goal, is like Stephen Hendry picks up the ball on the left, and I'm not sure, I think it might be Craig McGuffey that goes out to me. I can't remember who it is that goes out to me. The ball takes an enormous deflection off McGuffey, and it just completely wrong foots Jack Newman and somehow goes into the net. And it's like watching Jordan Brown's post-match interview. I mean, he interviews like he's auctioning things at the same time. Like he's going absolutely going rapid fire here. But he's just talking about how the team were like basically on top in terms of metrics. I know that's not necessarily stuff that fans want to hear after you just lost the game, to say that our XG was better or we ran further than their team. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. But I know where he's coming from. You can be really pleased with the team's general performance and think that they deserved something for the match. But ultimately, it was a freak goal that lost them the game. He said that he's obviously disappointed with the result. It wasn't like the team were cut apart or there was a defensive failing or a supremely good piece of play from Accies. It just completely prized them apart and they couldn't deal with it. I think they were in the game right throughout it. It's just a hugely horrendous piece of luck that lets that goal go in.
And I suppose they can take encouragement from that because, they're down to the bare bones in terms of a squad. But that starting 11 that Hamilton put out is still pretty good. And yet on the day, Peterhead were a better team, and again, they've like their form has been patchy. I certainly think defensively in general, they haven't been good enough, and it probably, I mean, he was absolutely gutted in the aftermath. You can tell because you say it was an opportunity to close the gap between themselves and 4th place. But I do still think as a newly promoted club from League 2 to League 1, and I think there is, I still think there is a jump in quality. Well, an obvious jump in quality between League 2 and League 1. I still think Peterhead have like, even if they weren't to finish top 4, I still think they've given things a kind of good account of themselves this season. I still think they're having a strong campaign. So I don't think it needs to be too, I know you're going to be disappointed at conceding a last minute winner, but I don't think it needs to get too downbeat.
No, I completely agree with you. I think this has been a very successful campaign for Peterhead so far. Obviously, still a long way to go, so you don't want to get too carried away and believe you're safe, because you imagine Montrose are capable of putting together some results. You know, the Hamilton Academical, that squad is likely to change even more between now and the end of the month. Kelty Hearts have brought in a couple of interesting signings, so there is movement at the bottom of the table there, so you don't want to get too carried away there. But I think on the whole, especially when you remember the state they were in when they left this division, when it was basically just the Brown and Strachan came in effectively as a firefighting mission after the end of the Jim McInally, David Robertson's really poor time in charge of the club. The club are in a much better place, and I think there's players who the team's quite an interesting balance. There's sort of like guys from the Aberdeenshire area who have had like really good careers in full-time football, but then not necessarily be fit enough to play full-time anymore, or they're local to that area, and if you can't play for Aberdeen or you can't get a game for Cove Rangers but you still want to play for a big team, that's you go to Peterhead. But I do think that in terms of a team who might be able to play some of the best football in the division, I would actually say that Peterhead are some of them. There's a lot of time when you and I cover the games, and when you're watching the highlights and there's passages of play that you're just like, fuck me, that's really good. I really hope you score from that. For instance, just you touched on there about like Jamie Smith making the double save. There's some of Peterhead's like balls in behind were really good. There's a Craig McGuffey plays, it's like an outside of the foot pass with his a ball into the box. Great stuff. You don't see that very often at this level. And there's Dylan Forrest, again for McGuffey, plays this like lobbed pass over the top for him to run to. Perfectly weighted, beautifully timed. Not a lot of teams do that, and I do think that when Peterhead are in form, as they were at points in this game, I think they're one of the best sides to watch in the division.
Even, I suppose even the first goal, that kind of equaliser that was 2 minutes after Kevin O'Hara's.
Outstanding.
Like a really good kind of defence splitting through ball from McGuffey, and then just a really good finish from Kieran Shanks. A kind of quite an interesting technique. He manages to kind of whip it and bend it just inside.
Brilliant. The finish is
really good. Yeah, really good.
The finish is really good. I think that was certainly a moment that Peterhead fans were cheering. They were certainly not cheering Kyle. It was Stephen Bradley's goal, because it's like sort of Kyle McDonald works the ball down the right, passes it into Bradley's feet. I think Bradley does well to bring it under control because the ball sort of bobbles a wee bit, but he controls it, hits a powerful shot low into the net, and as the Hamilton players were shouting, "Come on, Peterhead, this is rubbish!"
I've got that in my notes. The guy that sits next to the camera at Peterhead, you only ever hear him. He only seems to have two sayings. So he shouts, "Come on, Peterhead," and that seems to be if things are going well. He'll say, "Come on, Peterhead," and "Come on, Peterhead, this is rubbish." If things are going poorly, it's the only two things he says. The other thing I wanted to pick up on was Peterhead's goal music. I think there needs to be a serious conversation around.
Okay, remind me what it was they were playing.
So after Kieran Shanks made it 1-1, they played a kind of rave dance techno remix of Scotland the Brave.
Needs to go.
Which was unusual. And then Niall McGuinn's equaliser that made it 2-2 when he kind of darted in at the back post, got an end to a decent ball in. They played Blue by Eiffel 65. Like, come on now, this needs to change.
Did we? I need to go back and check my Instagram DMs. We got a DM from the we were talking about that was it. It was to do with goal music. They played it was a theme from Hawaii 5-0, and we were talking about that, and it said you can only play the theme from Hawaii 5-0 when you go 5-0 up. Doesn't happen very often. You don't hear the theme from Hawaii 5-0. Peterhead were like 2-1 up, and the theme music for Hawaii 5-0 kicks in. It's the wrong time to do it. You can only use that in very specific occasions. I'll need to dig out the DM, but the stay announcer got in touch to explain what it was. I think he's just the guy's just still searching for the best goal music. So the search continues.
The other thing I wanted to point out was Jordan Brown's hair seemed quite luxurious. Like I mean, pictures I've seen of him or interviews he's done in the past, he's looked quite threadbare at the front of his head, but I thought it looked quite thick on at the weekend there. He looked like, who was that guy that went viral in the summer? The Ibiza Final Boss. I have never seen his hair look like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. That sounds like I'm criticising. I'm not. It looked good. It wasn't quite as bowl cuttish as that guy from Ibiza, but it looked like he had a lot more of it than I thought he had. Fair play.
He did. He looks a lot of the time you see him, he looks like Joel Sked standing under the lights at Hospitality at Somerset Park. But he looked a lot better here. Again, just really interesting to listen to. Jordan Brown. I always really enjoy his interviews. Had to watch this in 0.75 speed right enough to just make sure I could comprehend everything. But I saw, Shaughan, it was a stat put out on Twitter by the Blue Toon podcast. Really good podcast, as the name suggests, covers all things Peterhead. And they said that Jordan Brown and Ryan Strachan, they've been in charge of the club for over 1,000 days now, which is a pretty good stat.
Yeah, and it's been I think certainly their tenure has been so good. Like, obviously just missed out first season winning the league. Last season, as I said, that really feels like they've progressed again in this campaign. So a very successful 1,000 days.
Yes, Hamilton Academical, meanwhile, in a very different sort of space there to them. You mentioned the players leaving. The other guys, I think Kevin O'Hara has been linked with moves to Stenhousemuir or East Kilbride. Ollie Shaw is rumoured to be joining St Johnstone on loan. And we mentioned, I think last time we spoke about Hamilton Academical, that Rob Edwards, the new chairman, has said that the squad that began January will look very different to the one that finishes January. Some you touched on there with the young boys there. So I suppose it's just trying to get as many points as possible while you're still able to, because there's the club that there was a report published in the Daily Record on Sunday. The Accies wage bill is £80,000 per month, which is genuinely staggering at this level. And that's before coaches and staff are taken into consideration. They spent £500,000 on their first 6 months in being in League One, and they had 37 players on their books by the end of 2025. I can't quite get my head around those figures and those numbers that are being bandied around there. Yeah,
I mean, the fact that it's been allowed to get to that point is extraordinary. And as Edwards has said, that has to change. And he said, I can't remember exactly his comment, but it was around whatever league they're in, it's kind of unimportant. They just need to exist. And it may mean that they end up getting relegated this season if they're going to essentially play what would be regarded as maybe almost a youth side. Depending on where they are at the end of January. I suppose that, I mean, they've brought in that young loanee from Hearts. Is it Kai Smutek or something? He plays centre half at the weekend against Peterhead. It might be that some of the young guys that they've got in their books at the moment are good. I suppose we'll maybe find out. But the fact that, as you say, Cove are far better now than they were at the start of the season. Kelty feel like they're in a stronger position. I think Hamilton's going to have their work out here in terms of staying up, and that's if there's no further points deductions, which would just be a kind of bridge too far for them if that was to occur again. The website was taken out of bounds, wasn't it? There's something like that. Something I actually don't have it written down on my notes here for some reason, but I'm sure that when you went onto the Accies website, it said something like, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it's quite an opaque stuff. Is it to do with the funding globe and this boy Johnny Towers? Is it something to do with that? It was to do with, so it was that Johnny Towers was suggesting that no deal had been reached in terms of then paying back that money that they received from the loan shark company, and he'd also suggested that actually the shares, they weren't the official, they basically didn't have Zingen's shares yet, but then they refuted that, and so ultimately he'd put that on the front page of the website, but there was no way to get past it, so it was the only page of the website. They now have a new website and have just copied and pasted everything over. So they've had two Twitter profiles in the past, and now two websites. I saw somebody in Pie and Bovril saying, well, if you can have two Twitter pages, two websites, just build a second football ground in Hamilton. It's all fine. You don't need to go back to New Douglas Park. Just build yourselves one.
There's also the Hamilton Advertiser, which basically falls under the Daily Record banner. They've been banned from reporting on the club. The Advertiser received an email from Rob Edwards, the new owners you mentioned there, published in full in the article. It says, this decision follows a series of articles published over the last 18 months, which the club believes have not reflected a constructive or professional relationship between yourselves and Hamilton Academical FC. With immediate effect, we ask that you also refrain from contacting any players or staff members in relation to club matters. Should there be any official statements or updates from the club, these will be communicated through our established public channels. And I saw that Rob Edwards quote tweeted it on Twitter, and he said, I was fifth in line to ban you actually. Journalists pick up the phone, not wait for it to ring. More Bananarama than Panorama, I'm afraid. Quite like that one. That's quite good. I was trying to gauge the response on this, but I think that the Hamilton supporters, they're a bit sanguine about the fact that the paper's been banned. Or there's certainly a faction of the fans. They see it as a mouthpiece for some interested parties. They'll run uncritical articles. Am I right in saying?
Without knowing too much about it, it kind of feels... Because what I found quite confusing was this ban for the local paper presumably came on the back of that article which had been discussing the finances. But I didn't think that was necessarily showed certainly the current owners in a bad light by any stretch of the imagination. So I thought that was quite interesting. But I suppose the suggestion was that this stretched back for a number of months, that they've been unhappy with how the reporting has been going. And going by comments, it sounded like that the local paper had been not supportive, but not necessarily critical of people like Jerry Strain, for example, in the past. So it feels like there's been a kind of final straw type of scenario with between the paper and the club.
Darren McKinnon said this result, he hopes it can be a marker for the team for the rest of the season. And up next, Shaughan, they are taking on Cove Rangers at home.
I think, like, it was hard to tell in terms of a kind of 9 or 10 minutes highlights package, albeit it's a good highlights package. But I wasn't overly impressed by Hamilton at the weekend. I thought they were reasonably fortunate to get all 3 points. I think Cove will get something from it, but maybe not enough for all 3. So maybe let's go for a draw.
Fair play. And then Peterhead are travelling to Montrose for this one. Now, we'll come on and speak about it just shortly, but Montrose did lose 4-1 to Alloa Athletic on Tuesday night, and it looked like the Wasps made pretty light work of them.
Yeah. Although, like, Montrose have been in pretty good form of late. I was actually surprised at certainly how big the kind of nature of the win was for Alloa, but I think I'll go for a Peterhead win for this, actually.
Fair play. And just sticking with Montrose, as we mentioned there were 2 midweek games in League One that had pretty large consequences at the top of the division. Inverness Caledonian Thistle defeated East Fife 2-0 at Bayview. They are now in first place. And Alloa Athletic thumped Montrose 4-1 at the Rex. They've opened up a 7-point gap between themselves and Peterhead in 5th place. And it really feels like the division is, you have Inverness Caledonian Thistle, Stenhousemuir, Queen of the South, Alloa Athletic, and the rest of the teams. I think it'll be between those. I still think Inverness Caledonian Thistle will ultimately win the division, but I think between the other sides there's a really interesting battle there emerging for the effectively who finishes where in the playoffs. Did you get a chance to see any of the highlights from either of these games?
I haven't, unfortunately. I did. The Inverness one was like the Alloa's margin of victory was interesting. That it was, but in terms of the one I was kind of most interested by was Inverness, because I was thinking to myself that Stenny had went top, albeit had played 2 games more. Inverness were starting to drop points and lose games that you maybe didn't expect them to, and like East Fife have been poor as of late. I thought, my goodness, if East Fife can get something from them, then maybe, just maybe, and I know there's nothing in it, there's goal difference in it at this moment in time, but that felt like, without seeing the highlights, it felt like Inverness just, not necessarily getting their house in order, but it sounded like it was a reasonably professional win, and that's all they have to be. I think as long as Inverness have got a better squad, they've got a better team, as good and as great as Stenny have been this season. If Inverness can just be competent from here on in, and it sounded like Tuesday night was, then I think they'll win the title.
I think Scott Kelleher really needed this. I think he really, really needed this, because in the league, certainly, it was at 1 point out of possible 9. You had lost to some of the poorest sides in the division. You'd lost to, let's say, it was not Stenhousemuir, but you'd lost to Montrose, lost to Stenhousemuir, had drawn with Cove Rangers, could easily have lost that match as well. Yes, they had a good result in the Challenge Cup by beating Partick Thistle, but you follow up that immediately by playing pretty poorly. Can he beat the Spartans and then losing on penalties? And it's that point where there's a bit of noise emerging as to whether or not he's the right man to lead the club forward. I think that perhaps the criticism is that they're quite one-dimensional. They're good at what they do, but when it doesn't work, I think they find it quite difficult to have a plan B. So I think for him just to go top of the table, get that win, I think it was. I don't think Inverness, Caledonian Thistle were at their best. It took a stunning goal from Alfie Stewart to open the score, and Inverness, Caledonian Thistle posted the goals on their Twitter page, and then a really nice goal right at the death from Alfie Babbage to make sure of the points. But I thought it was like thank Christ for that. We're back at the top of the table. We've got a game in hand. That's a really good result for them. And the second game, Alloa Athletic, I just very quickly before you and I jumped on, had a chance to watch the highlights. Alloa looked classier. Luke Donnelly scored the 4th goal, and it's a lovely, lovely goal. I think he gets the ball played into him, and just, that way where he just likes rolling the ball under his studs. I think he rolls the ball, takes someone out of the game, and shoots to score. So the goals looked really good, but Montrose looked really poor in this, which is frustrating given they had a wee upturn in form recently.
Donnelly is so frustrating. The fact that he, we'll talk about him every now and again on the podcast, or we'll mention him because he scored a ridiculous goal on a view for the terrace. Scored a really good goal on Tuesday. The problem is he'll probably not score a particularly good goal again until April. It's just and it's so frustrating when you know how good he can be, but it's just it's always fleeting moments rather than good form from him.
And that's why he's playing for Alloa Athletic. If he could do that all the time, he'd probably be playing for Manchester City. He's got the talent. He's got the talent. Now, we'll finish up this podcast by talking about the only fixture that took place in League Two. Stirling Albion entertained East Kilbride at Forth Bank, and the visitors emerged victorious. John Robertson and Zhao Balde gave Kilby a 2-goal lead in the first half, and Cammy Eadie's late goal proved to be nothing more than a consolation. Stirling Albion 1, East Kilbride 2, and this result ended the Beano's good run of form in the league. The first defeat in 5 matches. They're in 6th place with 23 points, and this, meanwhile, was an enormous win for East Kilbride. They really, really needed this to close that gap in Spartans. They're now 5 points away from them. They're on 32 points. Shaughan, I'd like your opinion on this game, if that's okay.
I thought East Kilbride looked like worthy winners here. I know that certainly Stirling Albion got back in it kind of late on, and they had a wee flurry of chances, Stirling Albion, at the start of the second half as well. But East Kilbride created a lot of their own, and certainly could have scored more than the 2 that they did. And I think if you're a Spartans fan, the concern might be that East Kilbride, they've brought a number of players in, and it looked like a lot of them were involved in terms of this game. So it looked like Bobby McCluskey set up the first goal and looked like he was heavily involved in general for a number of chances that East Kilbride created. Ben Williamson, who's come in, set up the second goal. Craig Hepburn, who's come in, goalkeeper on loan from St Johnstone. He had a really good save at one point, down low to his left, and although you didn't really get a chance to see it in the highlights, judging from the comments, it sounded like he was quite comfortable with the ball at his feet, which is something that it feels like that's
big bonus,
which kind of had previously hampered them before his arrival. So it felt like it was, and we know East Kilbride can, when they're on it, they will be the best team in League Two. It's just they have been very inconsistent. But Saturday felt like, or certainly looked like a good performance, and you do wonder if the players that they've brought in are going to kind of galvanise them and allow them to kick on. And for Stirling Albion, I don't think they won the poor by any stretch of imagination. I thought they should have had a penalty at 0-0, and they had chances to get the equaliser, although whether that would have been warranted, I'm not entirely sure. So I don't think anybody needed to be. I don't think Albion needed to be annoyed by the defeat. There was no interview with Alan Maybury which was a shame. But from an East Kilbride perspective, I thought, as you say, massive result for them, but performance-wise, that was the most encouraging thing.
It's interesting you pick up on the new signings, and I watched Simon Ferry's post-match interview, and I love when he gets interviewed by his son. I just think I always get a real pop for that. I think that is class. But it's interesting when he talked about the new signings they brought in, where it's like they wanted players with a bit more physicality about them. And I think like you look at like Ben Williamson, for instance, not played a lot of football, but he is actually quite a physically imposing guy. And I don't know, and if this is, I wonder if they have looked at the likes of the Spartans and just maybe said, right, we maybe might need to be a bit less idealistic in what we do here, and just maybe have like big laddies in the team. Now, for instance, you look at like the 5 guys that they alternate a wee bit, but the 5 guys that play at the back for the Spartans, you've got Callum Booth, very tall, Ayrton Sonker, very tall, Kevin Waugh, very tall, Jordan Tapping, very tall, and Kieran Watson, he's also very tall. And so a lot of the time when it's at this level of football, when it does come to players kicking the ball down the park, it's not really often that any of those players are going to like lose out in aerial duels. On top of that, they're quite strong boys as well. They can look after themselves. And I just think sometimes the East Kilbride, as we've seen, can be a wee bit soft-centred. So by having a bit more physicality in there, that can ultimately go and help win games of football at this level. And sometimes, you might want to play like really attractive, eye-catching football. And East Kilbride are still capable of doing that. It's just that they can now, not many other teams are really going to shove them about.
I think you might be right. I think that could have come into their thinking in terms of maybe how they've approached January. And I think as well, you've already seen, maybe even before January, maybe a few weeks before that, it feels like they don't, as you say, they aren't quite as idealistic in terms of we have to play out from the back. I do think, not that they're not playing football, but I do think they are quite a wee bit happier in terms of going longer, even if it's just from a goal kick. Take a goal kick. You don't have to play it to your centre half and so on and so forth. So no, I do think there has been certainly a change in style and potentially a change in how they approach the squad building as well, which is interesting.
The squad building element, I'm glad you brought that up, because they're already having another churn of players. Just like in the past week, in fact, the James Lyon has left the club on the social media. They said he needs more game time. He's not getting that at the moment. Regan Mimna is left to start a new life in Australia. Fair enough. Good luck to him. Hope he really enjoys himself. Magnus Mackenzie returns on loan to Queen's Park. Freddie Owens returns to Hibernian. And I don't know if I'm going to imagine Mackenzie is now a player that Queen's Park might have use for. I liked him the times I've seen East Kilbride a couple of times this season. I quite like Magnus Mackenzie. He played I think he's a left back, but he can play either side and looks quite competent there. Quite a big laddie, quite comfortable in the ball. So I think that he has got a chance of giving Shaughan Crichton something that he feels needs, which is great. That's ultimately what you want from loan spells. Freddie Owens, I'd always stick up for Freddie Owens. I thought he was a decent young goalkeeper. There was times where I think the mistakes that were made from him, it was nothing to do with actual, not that I watched all his goals, but it wasn't much to do with actual goalkeeping. It was just more to do with trying to play out from the back and poor distribution and maybe doing stuff that you weren't comfortable doing. But I think he's a shot stopper and so on. I think he could go on and have a decent career at SPFL level. But I find it interesting that 7 players have departed from this window. 6 of them were signed in the summer. The only one who wasn't was Regan Mimna.
Yeah, I think because East Kilbride are such it's unusual for a League 2 team to have a lot of attention on them. And I think because of East Kilbride, because of the management team, because of maybe the size of their squad, the fact that they used to run away with the Lowland League, there has always been an attention on them that you wouldn't normally get for a League 2 team. There is a certain a big degree of interest. I sometimes think we could potentially look too much into it. I agree with you though, the fact that you can bring in so many players in the summer and they have already left by January. And we did talk at the start of the season about how Mick Kennedy would cope with the fact that you can't just go out and sign a right back in October if things aren't going particularly well and you need a right back. it has been interesting. Whether we're seeing or looking into it a wee bit too deep, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, especially with the loan players. I mean, loan players move back to their parent club like all the time in January. It's just that just happens. But the fact that there's been a number of permanent signings as well that have already left is unusual. But that's not to say there's necessarily anything a bigger reason for it, if that makes sense.
Shaughan, the man just loves signing players. That's it. That's the only reason. It has nothing to do with the environment at East Kilbride where these players fit in tactically. He just loves signing players. It really is as simple as that. You mentioned about they should have had a penalty, Stirling Albion in this match. I completely agree. You can see it's a clear, and I thought the East Kilbride highlights actually slowed down so you could get a better look at them. A very clear tug for Jordan McGregor on Russell McLean. And if there's anyone who's going to throw himself to the ground to draw the attention of the referee, it's Big Rusty. And to be honest, I can't fathom why this wasn't given. It looked like a clear tug on him. And that might have changed the course of the game.
I think he makes the most of it. But as you saw in the replay, as you say, when East Kilbride highlights slow it down, I mean, his jersey is really getting tugged, and it looks, albeit in slow motion, it looks really clear because it's like McGregor's actually a wee bit away from him, and like there's so much fabric getting stretched as he pulls his jersey.
The way you're doing it's like, why Ara? You're like grabbing somebody's jumper with that degree.
I tell you what I didn't like though. It felt like, and maybe it was later in the game. It's hard to gauge how long after it was from the highlights. But Russell McLean absolutely nailed Craig Hepburn. And Hepburn came out to, I think, maybe clear the ball, and Russell McLean absolutely clattered them. And it felt like that McLean was still very much taking umbrage from the fact they didn't get that penalty. I'm not saying it was definitely a red card, but it was it looked like quite a nasty tackle.
If you're going to do that, do it to Jordan McGregor or do it to the referee. Don't do it to young goalkeeper. He's had absolutely nothing to do with it. Goal, it was John Robertson getting his goal. I think according to the East Kilbride commentator, it was his 54th goal in 44 games.
Yeah, really quite silly numbers. They got a small degree of fortune. It's funny, like we keep so many, he scores so many good goals, but a lot of them are quite similar as well. And it's one of those ones where, and I think it's already been mentioned, you know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Don't allow him to come inside, and that's what he certainly wants to do, and then let rip. But it's all very well knowing what he wants to do, but it's still quite difficult to stop him. But he did. Who was it? He came off. Was it Crane that it came off? It basically got a deflection and went past. Kind of Derek Gaston went past him. It kind of went one way, and the ball went the other. So they got a wee degree of luck. But then the second goal as well, I thought that. I thought it was Callum Crane. So the ball kind of goes between them. So it goes to, it was Williamson passes it to Joel Baldy. But it was weird. It was like Callum Crane, he kind of stops almost to twist his body. It was a weird way to react. And that gave Baldy the time he needed to, really good finish, to be fair. Take nothing away from him. But not great defending for either goal.
I would say there's a degree of fortune. I agree with you. A degree of fortune in the first goal that Robertson's shot clatters off someone's legs and completely wrong foots Gaston and goes into the net. That is bad luck. That's still a kind of bad luck. The Stephen Hendry's goal that we were talking about from the Peterhead Hamilton Accies game. The second goal, I could not believe how much time Ben Williamson had on the ball to actually play the ball in to Gilles Baldy. He's able to put his foot on it and look up and point and tells her, see that wee space just where Callum Crane's not looking? I'm going to play it into there. And Gilles Baldy shouts back, "Nay bother mate, I'll just sort of dip in there." It goes in. I just couldn't believe that no one thought to close down Williamson. And then on top of that, where Baldy actually points where he was, I think it was Crane was slow off the mark. I think young Connor Campbell had a bit of a difficult afternoon as well. Young centre back that they've got on loan from Rangers, ended up being hooked at half time. I thought he was quite slow off the mark here as well for this. And he looked like he really struggled with Cammy Elliott as well. We know that the East Kilbride front line are quite they'll give you a lot of movement. They can go sort of like laterally and vertically, so it is quite difficult to try and pin down. But he looked like he'd a pretty difficult afternoon. And on top of that as well, Lee Hamilton makes a great clearance. I think Elliott is just about to slam it into the net. McCluckie, sorry, beg your pardon, McCluckie's about to score from it, and Hamilton chucks himself in front of it to make it 3-0. So
he kind of back heels it off the line, doesn't he? It's just it's a really good way to do it. It's really cool.
That's a good clearance. And I suppose for Stirling Albion, the positives might have been like Dylan Wells came on for this game. Now, Dylan Wells, a young boy who is on loan from Motherwell. She's fine, thanks for asking. I'll get that one out there before you do. Now, I'd seen him on loan at Edinburgh City last season, and he looks a bit of a talent. I think there was big things expected from him, but I think he's had a really hard time of it through injury. And he came on in this match. He came on at the interval and was taken off 20 after 73 minutes. So my arithmetic's not too great. So about 28 minutes into his match with another injury. He looked quite good when he came on. McNabb sets him up about 10 yards out. Craig Hepburn makes a great save, turns it past the post. But I think if Wells can stay fit, he can offer Stirling Albion something a little bit different in the middle of the park to what they already have. We spoke about Stirling Albion last week, and we said that it's maybe pace is something they don't necessarily have. Like guys like Adam Brown, Robbie McNabb, Kyle Banner, all like good players in their own right, but not quite a particularly fast team. So hopefully Wells can come in and add something a little bit different.
Different is difficult as well to tell what happened with the goal. Because the highlights missed it from the kind of side angle. They had an alternative angle from it, like it was quite far away from behind the other goal. It looked like it might have been some kind of mix-up in the East Kilbride centre of their defence, but really difficult to tell. I think Russell McLean has the initial shot, and then it's Chris Eady that eventually finishes. So difficult to tell how that goal went, but they had chances after that as well. But no, I thought Kilby deserved to win.
Yeah, I think Kilby deserved the win as well. As you say, it's a massive result. It can't be long. I need to go and check. It can't be long till they're playing the Spartans away from home.
Is it not? It's next week, Tuesday
27th.
Yeah, Tuesday night.
Oh, jinx! I was going to go to Inverness Caledonian Thistle versus Stenhousemuir. I feel like it's a punishment for having played some hand in the draw there that I should go. I should go to, but this is a huge match. I might go to East Kilbride versus the Spartans instead.
I would have went if Raith weren't playing, but I've got a ticket for the hottest show in town, Leicester Hampden Queen's Park versus Raith Challenge Cup quarterfinals.
Brilliant. Well, fair play. That's you've been to Leicester before, haven't you?
Yeah, but a few times now. I've been quite fortunate in terms of getting tickets for games.
This is like, it's a real hot property. It's very difficult to get tickets for these matches.
I laughed actually because like previously it's always been, or certainly the last match rather, for when Raith were there, if you were a season ticket holder, if you wanted a ticket, basically your name went in a ballot, and it was very much one ticket, obviously one ticket. And then they announced on Monday that presumably Queen's Park weren't entirely confident that they would sell too many tickets. They said if you're a season ticket holder, you could get 4 tickets each. I'm like, well, wait a minute. 4 tickets each.
Hold your horses. Hold your horses here.
But I think they're sold out. I think they're already gone. So there might be a decent crowd.
No, very good. I do fancy. I do fancy it. I just think it's a really important game. There's a lot of riding on it, particularly top of the table. I think that it's a 6-pointer. I mean, obviously East Kilbride have got a game against Stranraer coming up before that, and I do quite like the rivalry between those two teams as well, Stranraer and East Kilbride. So it'll be interesting to see that continue. But I feel something. See, as a fan as well, it feels like you get a bit of a pat in the back if you go for these long midweek trips. Remember, there's still some guys that they went up in a Renault Clio for a midweek Challenge Cup tie against Elgin, and Stenny lost that match as well. I think it was the Elgin 5 they got called. There was the Cove Rangers 3 that went up for a midweek tie against Cove last season. So it's all very good. But I think, you know what I'll say like for this job, for doing the terrace, it's important to see as much football as possible. So from different teams. So that might play into my thinking for that one. As you mentioned there, Shaughan, East Kilbride versus Stranraer.
Based on the fact that East Kilbride looked like they kind of picked up a bit at the weekend, and the fact that Stranraer have had that kind of body blow as to what happened to them in the aftermath of their Scottish Cup win over Queen's Park. I'm going to go for an East Kilbride win.
And Forfar Athletic versus Stirling Albion at Station Park.
I will go for a low-scoring game. I'll go for Stirling Albion to win 1-0.
Fair play to you. Fair play. I think that will do us for the time being.
Yeah, I think so. We've covered everything there.
Aye, I had a nice time. Did you?
Yes, absolutely. Very much so.
Excellent. And if you sitting at home on your couch wondering where it all went wrong while you're eating, trying to think what Doritos. Yeah, that's what you're eating right now, aren't you? Eating Doritos with your big Watsits with your big
and then
orange.
Kind of wiping their fingers on their couch.
Yeah, or sort of doing that thing when they drag their thumb across the front of their teeth like that to get all the stuff off it. If you enjoy me and Shaughan talking, then do subscribe to the Terrace Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. For as little as £2 per month, you can get your hands on kilograms and kilograms of content. Shaughan and I are just about to record a podcast looking at 6 interesting transfers in the Scottish lower leagues over the January transfer window so far. We could have a chat about it in the main show, but what's the point when we can monetize it instead? So, it really leaves me to say thank you, Shaughan.
No, thank you.
Thank you, the listener, and enjoy your football. But unlike the Camelon Junior fans that ran onto the pitch to confront the Elgin City supporters and steal their flags following the Scottish Cup meeting at Carmuir's Park, which prompted a statement from the Camelon club to say that these young people do not represent them and they're really sorry. They look to recompensate Elgin for the flag being stolen. Aye, just please do so respectfully. Thank you.